Torniamo in diretta da Lucca Comics and Games, ospiti dello spazio di fumetti, e abbiamo la fortuna di avere con noi Howard Chaykin, portato da Salda Press a Lucca, con tutto il catalogo al momento disponibile dell'autore americano. Appunto lo trovate ancora nello stand di Salda Press. Howard, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. This is, as I said, this is my farewell tour. I'm here, and it was lovely to be invited. Thank you.
Howard diceva che adesso questo è il suo, diceva che proprio il suo ultimo tour, quindi adesso stiamo tenendo anche un po' un saluto con Howard. Looking at what Salda Press had is that here in Italy we have almost all you have done. We have Black Kiss, we have Hey Kids, we have almost everything. And for us in Italy, it's quite strange because we have an idea of what is the USA, mainly from superheroes and from mainstream comics. You, for us, are a little bit strange because you go over some boundaries that we have seen on TV, even on series, on cinema. I spent 18 months in New York.
How many months?
18. And reading your work, I started to understand how USA are really. You go over the kind of soft powers with which USA presents itself outside its boundaries. You are the sincere America. You are difficult for us to understand because we are not still able to decipher what you are doing. And what Salda Press has done with this publication is giving us some coordinates to understand really USA. Probably you are the most sincere authors we have from USA here in Italy. That's a big responsibility.
I can live with that. I think what you're talking about is the fact that out of necessity, I never became a popular figure in the popular material that is most popular in the medium in which I work. I loved superhero comic books and everything they represented when I was a little boy. When I became a professional with a very limited skill set. And that skill set didn't include being good enough to do acceptable work in that medium. And when it did catch up with it, my disdain for that work had evolved. I can still do that work, and I do occasionally because it's my job, but for the most part, I'm not particularly interested in the risk-free factor of pandering to an audience that is frankly very credulous and wants to be lied to. I like crime stories, I like erotic stories, I like horrors, I like our historical stories. But for the most part, I like to do material that doesn't have a permanent shelf life. The American comic book, the armature of the American comic book is almost identical to the Chuck Jones Roadrunner Coyote cartoons. It's a Mobius strip of no closure with characters who continue to pursue each other across a variety of urban terrifying landscapes. And I'm not interested in that. I just don't care about it. I like stories that have an ending, that have finite closure, in which characters are genuinely transformed and changed. The corporate marketplace has of course, in the corporate marketplace itself, you cannot have a character change. And that corporate marketplace sensibility and mindset has impacted itself on even independent material because they're looking to compete on the same playing field as that corporate stuff. And I'm not that guy. I'm not interested in that. I prefer a novel to an extended series. And I read a lot of series, I watch a lot of television, but the work that I produce has finite endings.
Dicevamo che per noi il pubblico italiano è molto difficile leggere i lavori di Howard Chaykin perché è molto referenziale su quello che è il tessuto americano e noi siamo abituati a vederlo un po' edulcorato da quello che sono i fumetti dei supereroi oppure le serie TV. Quello che invece specificava Howard è che lui comunque adora i fumetti dei supereroi, ha cominciato con loro, solo che a un certo punto diceva inizialmente non ero così bravo e man mano che mi sono evoluto ho cominciato a voler raccontare storie un po' diverse. Lui faceva un riferimento al fumetto supereroico che era molto interessante, come un nastro di Mobius, cioè è un infinito che si continua a ripetere. Lui invece è interessato a storie che hanno un finale, che sono più costruite, che non hanno questo telaio, questa armatura, lui la chiamava così stretta, e quindi lui ha preferito muoversi su queste cose, anche se ha detto è il mio lavoro, io i fumetti di supereroi li faccio ancora, però la sua preferenza è in realizzare queste storie. You have a particular way of making your characters talking. They are more concrete, they have a more free dialect in what they say.
In what sense?
In comics sometimes you have this kind of regulamentation. They cannot use some terms, they cannot face some arguments, they tend to not get too involved in some materials. You use a sort of another language, more real, more concrete, more honest.
It's very flattering. I think perhaps what you're getting at is that comics, both visually and textually, is a very trope-based medium that has that has a series of gestures that are familiar gestures. This means this means that, like no theater and kabuki. And years ago, I was criticized for writing I love this phrase. He described my work as public transportation dialogue, which he considered very insulting to me. And I regard it as a profound compliment, because I try to write in an American vernacular, in a way that people actually speak. I'm as influenced by the work of Frank Lesser, the songwriter and Broadway composer, as I am by anyone. And Lesser was a master of the vernacular American voice.
Facevo presente ad Howard che leggendo i suoi fumetti molto spesso ci vede un linguaggio un po' diverso da quello che è tradizionale dei supereroi, è un pochino più libero, anche un pochino più radicato in quello che è il pensiero americano. È una cosa interessante perché è quello che volevo fare. E lui citava adesso Frank Lesson, che è un compositore americano di musica popolare, che ha comunque contribuito a creare un po' lui lo chiama il vernacoliere americano, che è un termine che ritorna anche in italiano. Il vernacoliere è quel linguaggio un pochino più popolare, più radicato, più insito in quello che è il tessuto normale. Quello che diceva è che lui ha sempre cercato di dare ai suoi personaggi questo tono di realismo, di verità, quindi andando anche un po' a liberarsi da quello che era quei confini entro cui si muovevano i personaggi. What you're saying about the language is quite funny, because I was talking this morning with Andrea Ciccarelli, and we are talking how it was difficult to translate some of your choices, because in the first chapter of A Kids, you use Peace and Vinegar, that is a particular form of USA language, and in Italy we don't have something to translate, so it was necessary to make another joke.
Right.
So we Saldapres use Chine Tempestose, that is a sort of jokes on Wuthering Heights.
Right.
And that's quite funny, because languages are a sort of way of interact.
I think one of the reasons why I, for example, have no footprint in France is that my work is so idiomatically American in its language that it may not translate in any way to have any real contextual sense in French. It's hard enough in Italy and in Spain. I don't know. I went back and forth with Andrea about the pith and vinegar thing, because we had no. When I did the first volume of Hey Kids, I did not know there was going to be a second or a third. I just assumed it was to be a one-off. And the narrative structure of the books is such that there's a theme that runs through each volume, but it's not a single story. And the anecdotal nature of the material didn't lend itself to a specificity And that's why we came up with something, marginally clever. And I was grateful that Andrea could find something that worked for him as well, that wasn't mine. That was good.
Dicevamo che proprio il discorso delle traduzioni a volte è un po' complicato. Stamattina Andrea Ciccarelli mi raccontava che il primo capitolo di Sono solo fumetti, sarà quello il titolo italiano del lavoro di Howard, in originale Peace and Vinegar, che è una forma lessicale americana per indicare qualcuno che è proprio fuori di testa. In italiano questo non poteva essere, quindi è stato tradotto con chine tempestose giocando con cime tempestose. E ora faceva notare come questo discorso della lingua a volte complica un po' la vita anche nelle traduzioni in altri paesi. Ad esempio in Francia lui non ha moltissimo del suo lavoro prodotto proprio perché manca un discorso di traduzione che lo possa rendere valido. Faceva l'esempio con le traduzioni in italiano e in spagnolo, invece hanno un vocabolario più ampio su cui si può proprio giocare. I have here Black Kiss, and I found that the main character is a sort of man that is traveling during decades of USA history. Thinking back, I remember your American Flagg, and I arrived to divide the States of Histerya. How have you found this kind of travel USA has in those decades? How your country changed, and how you feel these reflect on your works?
I moved from New York City to California 38 years ago. I lived in California more than half my life, but I remain a New Yorker on permanent leave. And the paranoia that I learned when I moved to California has never left me. And I find California to be a discomforting place, much more so than New York. I am perfectly at home in big cities. I may not love it, but I can walk through the streets of Rome and feel like I'm in a city. California is not really a city. San Francisco is almost a city. Los Angeles is never going to be a city. And the sort of stories I like to tell are transgressive, about people who are maybe on the fringe. There was a post today by a fairly celebrated science fiction author who I'm friends with, about the fact that he'd become, finally he'd had it with people who presume that people who read stories about vile people or horrible crime stories or science fiction or horror are in themselves horrible and want to have their deepest, basest desires satisfied. And I replied by saying that I think the opposite is true. I think we work in a business in which liars, cheats, and thieves create a beard of virtue through their work and manipulate the audience, which is credulous at best.
In Black Kiss abbiamo un personaggio che attraversa diversi decenni della storia americana, ma il lavoro di Howard, in Italia abbiamo conosciuto American Flagg, siamo arrivati a Divide the States of Histerya, che sempre nel catalogo di Saldepress, e quindi volevo sapere come l'evoluzione della società americana ha influenzato il suo lavoro. Lui faceva presente che quando ha cominciato viveva a New York, si è poi mosso 30 anni fa arrivando in California, e diceva che lui si sente un uomo proprio delle grandi città, e stare in California per lui è un po' complicato. Lui preferirebbe stare nelle grandi città perché in California non ci sono grandi città, è quasi un mondo un pochino disilluso. Lui faceva l'esempio: Los Angeles non sarà mai una città, San Francisco potrebbe diventarlo, quindi questo dà già un po' la chiave di com'è il suo pensiero. Quello che è interessante notare è come ci sia in realtà nel suo discorso una voglia di andare un pochino oltre quelli che sono le sensazioni. Diceva in questo lavoro molto spesso ci chiedono le storie come nascono. Lui faceva un paragone dicendo anche le storie di fantascienza, le storie di crimine, tutti i personaggi che devono essere un po' uno specchio. Lui gioca molto su questi aspetti. Thinking about Divide the State of Histerya, I found extremely fascinating the fact that at certain point the drawings are smaller in your works, and the big screen, the big word, the sound becomes a visual component of the works, and it's like a sound that you can feel in a crescendo, and it's quite disturbing. It goes on as the pressure of the narrative goes on. And how have you found this kind of interpretation?
I write and draw my own stuff. I became a writer out of self-defense because my generation of comics talent was, the writers who came in when I was starting out were all failed artists. So they did not strike me as a credential. And I became a writer out of self-defense. And one of the things I came to understand is that other writers thought about their collaborators in ways that were very different from mine. I know for a fact that writing in comics is an entirely collaborative experience. It's completely collegial. The writer does not do all of the writing. The artist does a great part of the writing by the transliteration of literary ideas into visually, narratively endowed images. The other thing that's important to note, in my experience, is that the lettering in a comic book is not simply the delivery system for text, that it is part of the graphic experience, and that incorporating that lettering, those lettering effects into the pictures creates a rounder and more vital fictional world.
Facevo l'esempio su Divide States of Histerya, che è uno degli ultimi lavori di Howard, in cui a un certo punto, verso il finale, i disegni sono quasi più compatti perché c'è un grande spazio riservato all'onomatopeico, quindi al suono che viene proprio graficamente reso. E gli chiedevo come è arrivato a questo punto. Diceva: io da diverso tempo ormai scrivo e disegno le mie storie, pur sapendo come in realtà lui specificava molto spesso il lavoro della creazione di fumetti è un lavoro collegiale, c'è chi scrive, c'è poi la parte del disegnatore che deve rendere visione di quello che è la trama. Lui ha riconosciuto come si trova meglio a lavorare da solo, quindi a creare questo effetto, e questo è il risultato anche che abbiamo visto in Divide State of Histerya. One last question: what can we expect from you from the future, and what is your vision of the future?
I have no future.
No,
I'm old. I mean, come on. I'm 73 years old. I'm grateful when I wake in the morning and I'm not dead. I check my wife's pulse to make sure she's not dead, and I move on. You're laughing, I'm serious. And I'm grateful for the day I have. I live one day at a time. I don't live for the day, I live in the day. And I don't think about those sort of things. I did when I was 30, I did when I was 50, I don't in my 70s. And what I do now is I get up in the morning, I know my mission for the day, I know what must be done, and I do it. And I don't play golf, I don't play tennis, I don't fuck around with all that country club bullshit. I live a full life, and much of that life is continuing the process of getting up in the morning, going to my desk, and solving the problem that's waiting for me on my desk. And that's what it's all about.
That's a very good philosophy.
I thought that's what.
And I don't think that could be only a philosophy you have at some age. You should live every day, at every age, with this philosophy.
I agree.
Because today I feel like the future is coming to be a problem and not a possibility.
Right.
We live to project in the future that we forget it today, and we lose something of our lives, fearing of not having any better in the future.
My only concerns are with my children and my grandchildren.
Well, that's a very good concern.
I will not be around to help.
Maybe you could still teach something that they will remember.
They don't listen.
Okay.
Well, one of them does.
It's part of the, maybe they will remember.
I do what I can. Thanks,
That's
man.
good. Thank you very much.
An absolute pleasure.
For me too.